Good afternoon. As we run a special session today of Sefer Ahava, Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, we are continuing in Gate 1, in Book 1, in Section 1. We're in Gate Shara Zechira, Gate of Remembering, number 15. So we're going to talk about, this is a pretty important discussion topic. This is discussing the sort of the travesty. Then I doesn't really use those words. It's really talking about the severity of disputes and how tremendous a punishment attaches itself to it. So contentiousness leads to other grave and more serious transgressions as well. So he says, the Chofetz Chaim here, that until now we have been delving into the severity of the punishments of just saying Lashon Hara. Whether it's this world or the next world, then we can kind of understand how far we should stay away from this sin. And so that would mean that we'd also want to stay pretty far away from disputes, from machlekes. Because the essential problem, the essential sin itself, is a fairly severe, and it's a pretty terrible sin, because through the sin of Lashon Hara, we can come to basically wanton hatefulness, sinas chinam, right, and Lashon Hara, and rechilus, and all of these things. We're going to become even more detached from how we punish people, and we'll begin to do other things like say unkind words and violate the sin of Ona Asdavarim. We will embarrass them, which will be halvanas panim, making their faces turn white, which we'll talk about, and what's known as the kima and natira, lo si kam, lo si tor, to take different forms of vengeance and revenge, and also to have wanton curses, cursing people and what they do, and even to try to interfere with a person's ability to make a livelihood, and even so much more so with defiling the name of Hashem, Chil Hashem, and Chas V'Shalom, and these things should happen, because that's how severe this whole thing can become. And it happens to be fairly common that we even come to another prohibition of where we basically start to, it's called chanifus, which basically means to make people feel something that that isn't sincere, it's insincere feeling. And we basically that basically is called, we call it flattery sometimes. It sounds like you're flattering the other person. What he's referring to is actually you're trying to collect more people to your cause. So you're really becoming a promoter, an advocate for a cause, a terrible cause. So it's not that you're flattering the other person. What you're trying to really do is create a situation whereby you look to humiliate and socially ostracize the other person. Even though those aren't the exact translation of this, that's the intent of the goal of the person who engages in these behaviors. And we find this in the case of Korach, which the Gemara in Sanhedrin says. This is Sanhedrin 52a, because it says that Korach went ahead and collected a whole bunch of people. The verse says that Korach was very much dead set on collecting people to his cause, and that caused everyone to basically feel that they were in on a good thing. However, we find out that it was the exact opposite. So here's what really happens. Okay, so we find that he basically falls away, Korach. So but here's what happens when you have some very severe disputes. He basically starts to be sarcastic about things and become lazy about them, and you try to get people to join your cause, your rebel without a cause, and you try to accustom them to become a primary target of machlokes, of dispute. And that's what Korach was doing. That's what he was going for. And we've already talked about the severity of being a sarcastic and unserious person. Because it starts off with just slight bodily afflictions, but it becomes with absolute, it basically, it avalanches into so much more. Because you become seduced by this behavior from the Yetzer Hara, and you try to bring other people in on it, and you wouldn't want to even get out of it because you'd be left alone at that point. So you are even further tempted to continue to snowball these different things and to basically strengthen yourself almost with the force of an oath to perpetrate it. And we find this in the Midrash and the Gemara by Korach as well, because he brought Dasan and Aviram along with him. So you should see here, my brothers, right stuff of the time, how blinded we can be by this hatred. Because it's basically a false oath and a poor group of people. Because you're basically swearing to violate a mitzvah. We bring down in the halacha, in Yoredeya, Siman Reish Lamed Vav. So this is 236, and it's the second halacha in there. And the Shach says it like this. This is the Shach, it's number 4 there. That even if you fulfill an obligation like this, because you still haven't absolved yourself of fulfilling a false oath. I mean, that's how severe this is. And the severity of the punishment of a false oath is that Hashem himself does not clear away such a sin. Because the pasuk itself says, this is Exodus 27, that Lo Yinakeh, I will not wipe away this type of sin. And the Chofetz Chaim says, I've only written this to demonstrate how blinded we can become from the hatred. And even at very first, the person didn't intend to do such damage. Nonetheless, when this is what it precipitates into, one cannot be cleared from such a sin. As we find everyone who has accomplished things throughout the world. And there's a tremendous battle that is had with one's own inclination, especially the evil inclination. Because a person will have to try to be successful over these inclinations. Because when a person becomes angry and they wish to basically rule over their opponent, it seems that every type of activity that could trap you in this thing lays out for you on a clear path. Because the Yetzer Hara, the bad inclinations that we have, will show you how to engage in these different paths. And it's not only teaching you how to say bad things, and also teaching you about tale bearing and so on, because you're also going to be oppressing the person with words, and you're going to be embarrassing them, humiliating them. And you're also going to inflame and activate your inclinations. And you cannot have any sympathy on people who behave like this. So here, we're going to talk about how destructive machlokas can be. And that we should it's really a waste of time. But it's, people don't seem to waste the time. The Rambam himself wrote the following in a final testament to his children. He says that prophets will prophesy, the wise will teach wise things, and these people will continue to add the plague of dissent amongst each other, and they will never accomplish anything. However, I'm going to bring some important statements about it. That person should learn from it, how to stay away from it as best as possible. First, let's start with Midrash Rabbah by Parshas Korach. So it says the following: Amar Rabbi Berechia. It says in the name of Berechia. Okay, he says, how terrible is machlokas? Because the heavenly court only punishes people at age 20 and above, and the lower court punishes people at age 13 and below. But by Korach, they were even punishing children that were as young as 1 day old, and the whole group was swallowed, because it says them and their wives and their children and their toddlers, and they all went down into the deep pit. That's how terrible it was. The rabbis further teach that there are 4 people who are considered wicked. So someone who extends their arm to hit their friend, even if you don't hit him. Okay? So sometimes it's also called sometimes lifting your hand against him. Someone who takes a loan and doesn't pay it back. People who are brazen and are not embarrassed about being that way in front of people who are greater than them. And also someone who is intent on picking fights. Okay, and that comes from Korach. And therefore, a person should be embarrassed that when they know about themselves that they are constantly attracted to dispute, that if we were to call his friend wicked, even amongst themselves, that he wouldn't be achieving any form of embarrassment through that, even though that may cause him some type of loss. But it's even worse if he does do that, and he does get him to be known as a wicked person. How much more embarrassed and humiliated they should be above in the Beis Din Shamala, the heavenly court, as his name gets spread amongst others, and that they should be received well, especially amongst the heavenly court itself, for tens of thousands of years in so many holy congregations. That a person about whom they are announcing in the heavenly court and are displaying them for all to see up above, he should see all that, unless, of course, they've been, involved in terrible, terrible disputes. And that's why they say in Avos, don't show yourself to be a wicked person. And when it comes time to deal with some of these feelings of being a person who seeks dispute, even the Satan himself, the heavenly accuser, is one who stands with you. Okay, so there are 2 types of people, it says in this Gemara and Gittin, page 52a. And there are 2 people that the Satan likes to fight with. Okay, every single Erev Shabbos, they're constantly fighting. Okay, so they're running. There's always these 2 guys. Okay, so Rabbi Meir went to them, and he stopped them from fighting for 3 straight weeks. Okay, and as a result of breaking up the fight between them for those 3 consecutive Shabboses, he happens to hear from heaven that the Satan says, Rabbi Meir has taken me out from between them. So the idea is that that's where, if you want to know why do things feel bad in your life, it's because you invite those forces into your life that create dispute and disharmony. It says further in the Midrash Yalkut about Korach. Let's see how disastrous disputes can be. Because machlokas, disputes themselves, is missing the letter vav when you actually write it out. Okay, so it is a terribly destructive force. And as a result of being so destructive, it tends to ruin your life around you as well. And there are 6 things that cause it. And they are known as Maka, right? Being smitten. And there's 5 more of them. It's also Charon, wrath. Likui, which is to be struck with something. Klala, which is to be cursed. And Tachgit, which is a form of complete annihilation. Those are the 3 things that are coming from that vav. So this is what machlokas does to you. The better you are at being bal machlokas, the greater the emphasis is on what you do. Just like it says by Korach, that they were pretty great guys. They were Nesi'e Edah Kriyei Shem, and they were some of the greatest people of the generation. So the rabbis further say that in 3 places, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem himself, let go of Avodah Zarah. But he did not let go when it came to machlokas. So in the days of Enosh, they started to worship Avodah Zarah. And what did he do? Okay, so he didn't destroy the whole world. Okay, so he left it alone. But since there were people who were evil amongst each other that were constantly stealing, the whole world deserved to be punished. The second time when there was Avodah Zarah was in the time of the Midbar. The Jewish people worshipped the Egel Hazav, the golden calf. All right, that we can forgive. However, when it came to Korach, we find it said that when they were complaining, he couldn't let that go. So that's that one. The third one is in the days of Micha, during the time period of the judges. He builds an idol in his camp. However, it was peaceful at that time, and people just let it be because it was a peaceful time. However, when it came to the fight between Yehuda and Binyamin, then they were punished because they allowed it to go on. And that's why they were punished, because it says that there was a significant number of loss of the Jewish people at that time period as well. And since the 2 tribes of Yehuda and Binyamin were the ones who sinned then, this was taken from them later on, that in the days of Pekach ben Ramalyahu, he destroyed 100,000 soldiers of theirs. 120,000 soldiers of theirs. So we see over here that people who pick fights, that Hashem brings significant amounts of destruction amongst them, even if it stays and waits for a very, very long time. And it's also how difficult machlokas is, because it brings us to a possible life and death situation. For example, when the shepherds from Avram and the shepherds of Lot, in Parshas Lech Lecha, were fighting with each other. Lot goes to stone. We'll see what happens when he goes to stone. It's also another thing that happens is you can also just end up receiving lashes on your body for it and being smitten for it. When is that? So we see by the Torah itself saying that in Devarim Chafei. So in the book of Deuteronomy 25, 1 and 2, when two people have strife between them, what happened? Peace does not come from that. What happens instead? Im bin hakos harasha. Okay? So why is he called? He's called a Rasha in both cases, and why is he called a cause for this? Because he was inciting dispute. Another example is that it also can bring death to the world, because it talks about two men who are fighting and they strike a woman, and either she dies or the baby dies. And what caused that to happen? A dispute. So the rabbis say the worst type of thing is disputes in the home, because the home itself will be destroyed. Same thing too, that a shul that has disputes in it will be split up. And even furthermore, it's going to be destroyed itself. If there's disputes in the city, there will simply be an irregular amount of murders in the city. Two Talmidei Chachamim who live in one city, and so too, if they have two Batei Din in one city, and they have a machlokas between them, it's destruction, totally destructive. And not only that, destroying the destructive power of disputes in between the Batei Din can bring even more destruction to the world. Why? Because we see that when there's peace in the lower family, there's peace also in the upper family. Because it says by Amos, this is in chapter 9, verse 6, that Hashem builds the heavens up high. When does Hashem build the heavens up high? It says when the connection is between there and the earth, meaning when the Jewish people are in one bound, peaceful bound, then everything is at peace. And that is the end of that gate. So this is how a summary of how terrible machlokas can be and how we should seek to resolve it. And the machlokas can exist in so many different ways and so many different facets. And we should look to redress. We're almost at the end of the first gate, wrapping up more of the discussions about the terribleness of machlokas and lashon hara, and how we should keep it in mind. Thank you for joining. We will pick up at the usual time next week. Take care, and a happy Hanukkah, and we will see you next time.